Thank you. Can everybody hear me? Can everybody hear me? Good? Yes? All right, good. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, TTI. Thank you in particular, Rick. I first had this conversation with Bill 2.5 years or something like that ago, and it was in the fall. This was right before he fell sick. And I told him, I said, Bill, I think I've stumbled on something pretty amazing. I want to discuss it with you. And so we had a discussion, and he was very excited, and he said, all right, let's get through the holidays and the conference that year, and we'll talk afterwards. And obviously that didn't happen. So it's never lost on me that my relationship with Bill was very special to me, and I'm here because of him, and a lot of us are here because of him. And I hope that finally, after all this couple of years, that this topic, will sort of resonate with people like you that are so important to him. So thank you, Rick, for giving me this time. So we are going to do something different because it is a very unique topic. So this is what I'm going to ask you to do. In exchange, I will give you some gifts. So the most notable gift is at the end of this session, just the people in this room are going to get a link, and you will get a link to something I've worked on for the last 5 years. It's a new assessment. It's a happiness assessment. All good? Okay. So it's a happiness assessment, so only you all will have access to it. In addition to that, I'm going to give you some other gifts that will be part of the process. So in exchange, is that fair? Yes. May I ask for something in exchange? So I want you to turn off all your laptops. Even if you take notes on your laptop, let me ask you to turn it off. Let me ask you to take your phones and put them in your pocket. Let me ask you to also not take any notes. The list of things that you may think that you want to do, there's no shortage of. I don't want you to leave with a list. I want you leaving, feeling, and thinking something different. All right? So to that end, I'm also going to ask you to pair up with somebody, but in a different way, and for not so obvious reasons. So wherever you're seated or standing, you're welcome to come to the wall over here if you'd like. Just pair up with somebody in the following way. If you're sitting on a chair, go closer to their chair and touch their arm or their shoulder or something like that. So pair up with somebody. We will do an activity. So that's good right there. A little closer. Closer. Right there. Okay. So the reason I'm asking you to do that, you need a pair? You can join somebody else. Yeah, if you're single on a table, just do a threesome. Unique topic. Okay. The reason I'm asking you to do that is not what you think. I think that you think that I'm asking you to do that so that you can pay attention to me. And that's not true. That's maybe 10% true. But mostly because I want you to feel something different that we will do an exercise on later. So I want you to trust me that there's a purpose that I'm asking you to do all of these things. I'm actually not going to use a slide, so you can leave it. All right. All right. So the topic is happiness. And I have a unique sort of bent to it. So in terms of an agenda, this is what I'd like to do. I'm going to first of all start off with the why. Why do I think this is a relevant topic, and why do I think it's a relevant topic today? Then the how. How did I put all of this stuff together? And a lot of that has to do with neuroscience. So there's an enormous amount of neuroscience work that's going on right now. We are truly living in this golden age of neuroscience, and I'm at the nexus of it unplanned. And so I will share the sort of how with it, where the data came from. The third part is then I'll go through the what. And we'll do an exercise. I don't have any slides. Look, Mom, no hands, so no slides. So I'm going to do this old-fashioned way. I have 2 flip charts over here, and that's what we'll do. All right? So again, what I ask you to do is wherever you are seated, I want you to think that you and I are talking one-to-one. All right? So I actually don't have any jokes. I don't have a lot of stories. I'm not going to entertain you per se. I just really just want to sort of talk to you about this topic and share some insights with you. At the end of it, I promise you, I truly promise you, I've been doing this a lot now, the last 3 years especially. I think you will leave here feeling different. That's my goal. And I think you will feel that you have something new that could potentially be a game changer for you, tied up with the theme of this conference. Okay? So that's the agenda. So why? Why happiness? So several things going on. So first, in terms of why, Aristotle said it's the ultimate good. I think of happiness as the ultimate currency, if you would. So if you think, for those of you that are left-brained, if you think of every human activity and you put it in a linear equation, 1 + 1 + 2 - 3 divided by 5, at the end, the equal sign of every human activity is happiness. So I could ask you, what do you do? And you say, well, I'm a coach. I'll say, why are you a coach? You may say, well, because it makes me happy. Or you could say, well, I make money. Okay, why do you make money? Well, because I want to afford a home and a car. Why do you want to afford a home? Well, because I want to have shelter for myself and my loved ones. Well, why do you want to have shelter for them? Because it makes me feel good that I can provide shelter for them. So at its core, it really is the ultimate currency, consciously and for sure subconsciously. You do all of what you do. I do all of what we do. At the end of it, we want to have this feeling that we are good, that we did something good, that it is peaceful. So first, happiness is its ultimate currency. From a business perspective, over 100 years ago now, it's hard to believe, the Hawthorne Experiments. All of you know that, right? So that was the first time that we learned, oh my gosh, if we do something in the workplace, if we make someone feel better, productivity goes up, performance goes up. And over the course of the last 100 years, we've done all kinds of studies. We've used all kinds of names, employee engagement, employee satisfaction, all the HR stuff, performance management. We've all done these kinds of things to help employees feel better, feel more engaged, feel more passionate, feel more empowered to unleash their potential. So there are enormous studies out there. You can Google them. There literally is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of studies showing a positive correlation and causation between happiness and performance. I work with a lot of professional athletes and professional coaches. I'll tell you a story at the end here. But all of you know that. If you're happy, you're likely to perform at a much higher level. Conversely, if you're not likely to. Tiger Woods is a great story. He hasn't won a major in 10 years. He was never the same, not because of his injuries, but because of this embarrassment that he brought on himself. The emotional trauma of it, he was never the same. So it works both ways. So this topic of sort of happiness being the ultimate currency, being directly related to performance, and at the end of the day, it really is something that all of us are going after. All right, so now, how? How is it that, I've put together these pieces of the puzzle that I will share with you in just a few minutes? Several things. One is, since 2004, since the United States got involved in the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, we have had unforgivably historical levels of PTSD and suicides among our vets. These are the sons and daughters of our friends. These are our friends in many cases. And up until about a year ago, I'm sure you saw on social media the 22 campaign. People doing push-ups, 22 push-ups for 22 days, because that was the rate of suicides of American servicemen and women who had come back. 22 of our fellow citizens committing suicide each day after they came back from Iraq and Afghanistan. So DARPA, how many of you know DARPA? They're the military research arm of the DoD, the Department of Defense, in 2006, literally threw all the money that they could to try to help them. The traditional methods of therapy, coaching, psychotherapy, outplacement, job, all those kinds of things had very nominal success. 10%, 15% at best. It wasn't working. We weren't able to get to them. I started working with them when I was with EQ Mentor, providing coaching to them. I mentioned to you when I was here 10 years ago talking about EQ and sort of launching EQ, and I remember, it's funny, this interesting juxtaposition. 10 years ago when I was here talking about EQ, a lot of you were in this room, were back there on the stage as well, and said, Izzy, I don't know if we're ready to talk about emotions. What is this emotions? What is this emotion intelligence? And I feel like this is where we are with this topic also, with this happiness topic. So we're at the very sort of beginning stages of sort of making this relevant. So I spoke about my brother, who's a neuropsychiatrist in Chicago, a psychiatrist, not a psychologist. And DARPA called me and said, hey, do you know anyone who can use this money? Because we need to go figure out what to do with our vets. So I have access to all of that research there. Secondly, I have a PhD, and in 2012-ish, I got my first request from a doctoral student from Sydney, Australia, saying she wanted my feedback. She had done this dissertation on emotional intelligence. This is 10 years after I had done mine. So those of you that don't know what a dissertation is, it's the standard 5 chapters. And one of the things that a lot of candidates, PhD candidates, wrestle with is how to make their knowledge relevant. So one of the questions you have to answer is, okay, I've done all this research, but does it work in the real world? Like, how can this be used? So they reach out to me. I'm not an academic. I'm a sort of practicum doctorate, and say, hey, give us feedback. So I started doing that, and in the last 5 years, I do about 2 or 3 a month from all over the world. And I do it because, for selfish reasons, I literally have access to the latest research. So a dissertation, by definition, is you're adding to the body of knowledge, which means you have to demonstrate what the body of knowledge is from the beginning of time to now on your topic, and then you have to demonstrate what it is that you've done to add to that body of knowledge. So in the neuroscience world, it's absolutely exploded. And I can connect people. I can connect someone whose dissertation I read 3 years ago to someone who's doing their work now. I also connected with Matt Killingsworth. So I will share that name with you later. Do you know that name? Matt Killingsworth is a professor at Harvard. He has a 10-minute TED Talk out there. We'll send that to you guys. And about 5 years ago, he did that TED Talk. I know Dan Goldman from there. I called him. I said, I got to meet with Matt. And so Matt did the largest longitudinal study on happiness. 15,000 people, 80 countries, 650,000 reports, measuring people's emotional state around happiness. And he reached some very powerful conclusions around mind wandering and mindfulness, which is one of the reasons I have you paired with each other, and I'll explain that later. So I called Matt and I said, you've done all this research. You've shown there's a correlation between mind wandering, which is essentially you are not where you are. You're not where you are. You're someplace else even though you're here. And his research essentially found that 65% of the time, you are not where you are. And there's a direct correlation between that and your unhappiness. The higher that number, depending on the activity, the more unhappy you are. So the opposite of mind wandering is mindfulness. Right? So that's the work that I've been doing, and that's the work that's the neuroscience of it. So the other thing about neuroscience that is very, very powerful, just in the last 3 years alone, is up until now, we've been able to take a picture of the mind based on an experience. Through virtual reality, I can have people stand in a green room, pretend like they're in an ocean or wherever it is, and we can see the results of their cognitive functions occurring on a screen. You can have a full body suit where you can simulate an experience, and you can literally see the temperature going up in their arms or their neck, or their blood pressure go up. So we have phenomenal access to how it is that our brain works based on all kinds of stimuli. So what is different about the last 3 years versus the last 15 years is that before we took a picture, like the one picture Ron showed you, that's a picture. So you know when you're taking a video, so I'm a triathlete, I swim, I bike, and I run, and let's say that I swim one lane on a pool. So imagine that someone took a picture of me one picture of me swimming in a lane. Now imagine if someone took a video of me swimming in that lane. And imagine if I could pause that video at every single point of my stroke. So I do this, I pause, I do this, I hit the pause button. Now in the real world, that's not a big deal, right? We can do that. But in the neuroscience world, because this 3.5-pound organ in our brain is covered with the skull, we haven't had access to it. So now we can not only get an image of it, but we can follow a neural pathway based on an experience. So a neural pathway is the millions and millions of synaptic junctions and the actual road, literally a road, that a stimulus leads to. So why was that a game changer? So let's say I simulate something good for you. And I can see from the picture that this part of your brain lights up. So we've known that. We've known that for a while. Now let's say that you tell me that your memory, this positive memory, is, say, X. It's a chocolate chip cookie. Right? So I can simulate a chocolate chip cookie, and I say, okay, where is that memory located specifically in your brain, and how is your brain interpreting it? So that in the future, when, let's say that you're doing something else, and I give you a picture of the cookie, I can then see where this neural pathway is going. So in other words, we don't not only have the final destination, but we have millions and millions and billions of neural pathways that we can map out. So we know when something bad happens to you, where the neural pathways go. When something good happens to you, where the neural pathways go also. So all this information has come together. So I have a neuropsychiatrist brother using all his research heavily funded from DARPA. I have all these dissertations. I have Matt Killingsworth, who's done this sort of longitudinal study, but doesn't really understand why. He knows, he has proven there's a correlation between mind wandering and happiness, but he doesn't know why mind wandering occurs. And that's where the magic happened. So the why happiness? It's related to performance. It's the ultimate currency. The how, all the data that I'm going to share with you now comes from there. Everybody with me? All right. So the first thing that I think we need to do is let's define what happiness is. So 10 years ago, when Bill and Rick and Ashley had me here, if I asked you guys, what's emotional intelligence, all of you gave me a good answer, but they want the same answer. Now, if I ask you what is EQ, most of you will give me the same answer, right? So similarly, if I were to ask you, this ultimate currency, the ultimate purpose of all your activity, all your emotions, all your thoughts, all your behavior, is happiness. If I were to ask you, well, define happiness for me, you would all give me a good answer. They wouldn't be the same. That, to me, is unacceptable, especially for people like us. So part of the power of this topic and me being here today is to agree to what this definition is, and I'm going to give you a neuroscience definition. It's something we've been exploring since the beginning of time, through art, through poetry, through lyrics. We've been trying to express this concept of happiness in all kinds of ways. We've never been able to identify it, label it, define it from a neuroscience perspective, therefore making it indisputable, at least with the knowledge that we have right now. If you use spirituality, you get biases. If you use religion, you'll get biases. If you use yoga or whatever sort of model that you use, they'll all be inherent with biases. That has kept us from having this important conversation, same as 10 years ago, when not having a framework for EQ kept us from having that really powerful conversation around emotions. So let's define happiness. So I'm going to do this in multiple ways. So the first way is, let's talk about what it is not. So I'm going to throw a little chart over here with two labels. The first one is happy moments. Okay? And the next one is happiness. So this is this HQ topic. All right. So I'm going to throw something out, And you tell me whether it goes under happy moments or it goes under happiness. Ready? All right. A brand new car. Okay? A brand new house. Okay? Getting the promotion that you always wanted. Okay? An even bigger new house. Now, usually there's a bias here between men and women. Amazing pair of shoes. Right? So I can go on and on. But in the interest of time, I'm just draw a line over here. So this is what we have discovered from a neuroscience perspective. We have discovered that, in fact, the sum total of what we think of as happiness is not the accumulation of happy moments. Happiness is not the sum total of happy moments. If it were, then you would just do those things. I don't want to take anything away from what this is. This is good. This is not a bad thing. But it's not happiness. It's a sugar high. It's a dopamine high. It's a stress reliever. But neurologically speaking, it is not happiness. So part of the language around happiness is to first make the distinction between happy moments and happiness. So what is happiness then? So essentially, and this is a very careful term, it took me almost 2 years to come up with this term, it's the presence or lack thereof of negativity. Now, I can use all kinds of terms, but that's the term that I'm using. So I could have used other terms like trauma or PTSD or bad experiences or all kinds of other kinds of things, but let's just call it negativity that is stored in your brain. So all experiences that you have are stored in one part and only one part of your brain, or your body. And that's your brain. It's not stored in any other part. Right? It's never deleted. It's never filed in a different place. It's always over here. So we've discovered now, from a neuroscience perspective, that every decision that we make, or every stimuli that we get, in our brain goes through the prefrontal lobes. So your first reaction to every stimuli, sitting somewhere, driving somewhere, talking, everything is to give it a threat rating. Is this safe? The problem is that that threat rating is subjective. There is no universal standard on what should be a threat. So that interpretation is happening entirely on what is here. Right? So there are some conclusions that all this research, I can send you all of this data, from neuroscience has reached, and here they are. The first one is there is no random in the brain. There is no random in the human being. Even something that you think is random is not random. It might be subconscious most of the time, but it's not random. So all the things, sometimes you do something and you say, well, I didn't know why I did it. Well, there's a reason why, and it is related to this. So first conclusion, there is no random. Everything that every one of your clients you do, there is a reason for it. Second conclusion, somewhere between 80 to 95% of every decision that you're making is subconscious. So Ron is sitting over here, and can everybody see Ron? All right, Ron, why don't you stand for a second? Can I pick on you? I know I can pick on you.
Sure.
All right, let's face the audience. So let's say that, Ron, you were sitting right over here.
Yes.
And I was watching you, and you were giving me some not-so-good looks.
I was?
Yes.
Oh.
And I didn't appreciate it.
Oh, boy, I'm really sorry, Izzy.
All right, so look at how Ron responded. So let me ask you, obviously I was kidding, but in your response to me, did you see he nodded his head there? Did you decide that you were going to nod your head up and down?
No, that was subconscious.
Correct. Did you say, I'm going to go 1.5 inch up and 2.5 inches down, and I'm going to do that?
I intended for it to be a little bit less.
There you go. So even when he said that, his hand went up there, and he says, I intended very well, and then he put his arm around me. Now, the reason that he put his arm around me was because he was trying to diffuse some of the anxiety there. So all of that was subconscious.
Yes.
Like even now when you're doing this, you didn't say, I will take this hand, and I'll put this finger over here, this finger, and I'll do that.
That's right.
Right. So, thank you. So I want everybody to soft freeze. Not a hard freeze, just soft freeze. And I want you to think that if you were comatose, if your entire body would be in the position that it is now. No chance. So in other words, the way that you're sitting, the angle of your feet, the position of your toes, how you're looking at me, all of it are decisions that you're subconsciously making. They don't happen randomly. Now, with this, so if 80 to 95% of every decision that we make, including talking, by the way, is subconscious. And we've known for many years now that, gosh, almost 90% of direct communication is nonverbal. This supports that thesis. The reason 80 or 90% of direct communication is nonverbal is because our subconscious is picking up everything that is in the background of who you are, what your body is saying. I saw a dating site behavioral study. It was a scientific study. It said that when women meet men from in a romantic context, in a dating context, that 50% of the decision that they make is based on their appearance, 40% on their attitude, and 10% on what they're saying. This is what they're saying. Women here, is that true? In other words, the point I'm trying to make here is that our subconscious is the most powerful tool, and we don't know it. 80 to 90% of your behavior, the behavior of clients, is related to things that you aren't even aware that they're doing. Our training, my own work, has changed. I no longer do what I used to do for the first 22, 23 years of my career. I used to think that in leadership development, in coaching, I needed to tell you, give you a skill based on a set of competencies that you didn't have, and therefore I had to give you an idea, to tell you what to do, give you a model, give you a framework to how to think and how to grow. And I've changed that now. So there are two ways that we all grow. One is the obvious one, which is what I just described. You learn something new organically through the course of the year, or formally in a session like this. You learn something new, you have an aha, you grow. Another way to grow is, what if I removed this from your brain? One is software, one is hardware. In my experience now, having done this for about 5 years now, there literally is no competition. When I get hired now to work with a senior executive in a company because of a 360 or whatever the case may be, I look at it, I smile. That's not the issue that they have. I ask, are you happy? And I find out what these are. So things like empathy. So this is one of the challenges I've had with EQ, is I find an executive who has tremendous empathy for his daughter. He tells me, she did this, and I listened, and I held her hand because she was sad, all that kind of thing. Goes to work and is a bully. What is the answer I'm going to teach him about empathy? He has it. But something is causing that empathy to turn off in that context. Or something is causing you to turn it on in this context. And clearly, there's enough of this that it diverts the neural pathways. So, I'm from South Africa. Most of you know that. I took my kids for the first time this past summer to South Africa. For the first week, we did a safari every single day, twice a day. We went out, we saw the gazelles out there, so I'll give you one picture. Gazelles roaming over here, 10 feet away, 3 rhinos, 5 feet away, giraffes, all herbivores. So they're not afraid of each other, just all eating. Suddenly there's a sound. What does a rhino do? Whatever. What does the gazelle do? No. I'm now afraid. So take that to the workplace. So one of the dissertations that I read, great study, he worked with the boss of a group, senior management, and they had 10 design sessions. They had 10 two-hour design sessions to come up to solve, with a solution to a big company-wide problem that they had. For 5 of those 10 sessions, he had his boss's boss come into that session. Was there a difference in the 5 meetings that the boss's boss was not in and the meetings that he was in? In the meetings that he was in, it was the gazelle. Now, the trick was that although that was the stimuli, was he the real problem? Because the boss's boss was coached to go in there with a good attitude, to smile, to ask the right questions. But he was still the boss's boss. So that group, all the meetings that he was there, they underperformed. So what happens neurologically is, as in every experience, so this is the key. So if I've lost you, come back to me right here. In every experience, your first response is no different than the gazelle. Is this a threat? That threat is subjective. There's no gold standard around it. It is completely subjective. All right? So if that threat exists, your neural pathways get diverted. Instead of going to every part of your brain where you can pick the right data points, think of the right things to say, explore the capacity of your brain, your neural pathways, we can see this now, divert to not only your memory, but your worst memory. So good memories in the brain, we now know because of things like the cookie, have no taxonomy. All your negative memories have a taxonomy. There is an order to the negative memories, which creates the fear, the EQ, which dilutes your IQ, which leads you to underperform. Give you an example. Let's say I'm running, and there's a pebble. I fall, there's a scratch on my hand, no big deal. Next day, I'm running again. I fall, I break my arm. A month later, when I'm running, am I going to remember the scratch or the broken arm? There is a taxonomy. Our worst experiences are higher up. We know this now. We've asked people what their worst experiences are, and we've simulated them and see where the neural pathways are going. We put them in a collaborative situation where they have to perform at a very high level. And then we induce the boss, the lion, or something like that. It doesn't go to what is the solution. That skill is still there. In the 5 meetings where the boss was not there, they were good. They were effective. They were collaborative. They innovated. So the definition of happiness, the neuroscientific definition of happiness, which you won't like, is, at the end of the day, happiness is a chemical condition between the families of dopamine and the families of cortisol. Happiness is not smile, peaceful, laughing. That's this over here. The closest lay term to happiness, to the neuroscientific definition of happiness, is empowerment. Irrespective of whatever the stimulus is, the boss coming in, whatever it is, if your neural pathways can go to every part of your brain to find the right data points to make the best decision, that is what peace is. That's why we go to the beach. That's why we go run. That's why we do all those mindfulness kinds of things. We have also shown that on average, that there are 12, what I call movie theaters or monologues or stories, that are constantly playing in your brain. The second something negative happens, most of this 12 are your top 12 bad memories. So PTSD, which is traumatic, a divorce, loss of a child, these are all very traumatic. Stress. So the other thing that we have uncovered about happiness and neuroscience is that there actually is no reality, and this thing that we call a brain is but an interpreter. It's just an interpretation machine, and that interpretation machine is actually based on what is here in your brain. It's not a standard. If there are vets in this room, if someone came in with a gun here, God forbid, a vet would know what to do. Civilians maybe not. Same stimuli, different reactions based on what's there. So this state of high performance, this correlation now between mindfulness, is directly, again, related to not letting your mind wander. So your mind wandering is you're not here. So if you're not here, where are you? So this is the question that Matt could not answer that I answered for him. He found not just a correlation, but a causation between mind wandering and unhappiness, a positive one-to-one correlation. Well, your mind wanders. Why? Because we have all of those there. We don't even have a language. We don't even have a definition to talk about happiness. Nothing is there. So the first thing we had to do was to come up with a model, just like EQ. And trust me, I spent an enormous amount of time, the last 3 years specifically, to make this simple. Don't quote me on this, but to dumb it down. What is the purpose of a framework or a language or an assessment if you can't use it? It's too hard to understand. And with this topic, happiness, it was too important. I wanted to use already branded terms. So let's go through this. Self-image, M, mindfulness, negativity, E, empathy, O, optimism. Now, I could give you neuroscientific terms, but why? So I can sound fancy? These are terms that you know. You know what self-image is. You know what mindfulness is. And look at the time over here. Okay. So that's the framework that we have used. So let's do something very quick, very, very quickly. I want you to look at each other's faces. Turn around and look at the face of your partner. We're going to do this very, very quickly. All right, everybody with me? We got 8 minutes, so we got to do this very quickly, plus I have to tell you a story. I want you to look into the other person's face, shoulder and above only. I want you to find 3 unique attributes in their face. 3 unique attributes about their face. And keep inventory of them. Okay? 3 more. 3 more different attributes about their face. You should have 6 now. Find 3 more. You should have 9. You should have 9 now. Everybody with me? 9. Do 3 more. All right, 12. 12 and 3 more. All right, everybody to me. Everybody to me. How many of you got to 15? Good. 12. Okay. If we had more time, I could pick anyone. What's your name? Deborah. Could you stand up with me, please? If I had time, I guarantee you, may I touch you? Yes. All right. From her shoulder and above, I could come up with 100 of them in less than 3 minutes. Right? So I'll just do it very quickly again in the interest of time. Normally what I do is I go round robin, we all fire. So look at the color of her hair, her eyebrows, the shapes on her forehead, the 50 different colors, each one of them that I could name on her glasses, the neck, her jewelry, the dots over there, the what do you call this, when the hair goes out over there, the black shoulders, the neckline over there, her smile. She's got several pimples over here, sorry. She's, the shape, the shape of her nose. Now, I did that on purpose because I wanted her to open her mouth and smile, which she did, so now I can talk about her teeth. Her ears. So I can go on and on and on, right? All right, so thank you. Have a seat. So, Yogi Berra said, you can see a lot by just looking. All right? Now, how many of you knew that there was that many in just 100 from the shoulder above in a person? This is mindfulness. There are so many things to see that you don't see because your mind is wandering and because you're playing those other stimuli. And the negative stimuli cannot just be an existential stimuli, the traffic light turned red, I'm late for a meeting. It can also be the negative stimuli of what's in your brain already, or what is currently happening. So you cannot be at your best until there's only one movie theater that's playing, and that's the current reality. So this technique that I just showed you, I can do with all 5 senses. So that's the great part about this. If we had time, I'd go through feel, I'd go through touch, I'd go through smell, and I'd go through taste. But we don't have time. Every May, I go to Nacogdoches, Texas. I work with the Navy SEALs out there. I work with the sharpshooters over there. And when we pick a target, they're not picking at that person. They're picking at this little wrinkle on the right cheek. That's the amount of focus that it takes. So how many times have you looked at somebody and just looked at their face and said, and not even know that there are probably 100 different things that you could pick up from there? So mindfulness is a temporary stopgap measure to get you away from here, to not let this neural pathway go to the negative spot. So EQ is the tool, happiness is the destination. Mindfulness is a part of happiness because this is going to be there. And there are lots of ways of dealing with this, and I'll tell you a very quick story. But in the interim, when you have game time, let's say that you have a normal day, and at 10 o'clock and at 2 o'clock of that normal day is your most important part. You have an important sales call, a client meeting, a conversation with your spouse or your kid. That's your game time. This can exist. But in order for you to get ready for your game time, you have to be mindful during that time. You have to use EQ in the 1 or 2 hours before that. What's my emotional temperature? How can I regulate myself? I go to that meeting, I turn myself into green, I'm good to go, I'm in the clear. I go to the meeting, I've taken care of my EQ, Ron's pissed off about something. Social awareness, empathy. Now, before I even talk about anything that I've talked about, I got to get him, use my social regulation skills to get him to green. Once the EQ is done, part of it, now I know that I've given his faculties the best chance to go everywhere that it needs to go to reach the best decision. Now, I know even after I have done that, as I'm talking to Ron, my mind's going to wander. Because something is going to happen that's going to be a threat. Like the time is up, or he's not saying something that I think he should say or not do, or those kinds of things. And in those moments, 85 to 95% of the time, you're subconsciously, you're going to your worst place. So you can't afford now, if you're in the human capital business, number one, to not be a neuroscientist. So let me end with this. I know my time's up. So 2 years ago, I got hired by the head women's basketball coach, I can't give you her name, I have an NDA, of a top 10 college women's basketball program. She had won one national championship. She was in her mid-50s, a perennial top 10 team, very well-known lady. Her parents lived in Nashville, Tennessee. So she hired me. And she hired me, she said, because she hadn't won a national championship in 14 years. Won a lot of games, and she had become very antsy, and her style was getting worse and worse. Very loud, very demanding. So she hired me as her coach, because I work with a lot of athletes and teams. So I started working with her for about 2 months, and I do this all the time. I went to the first home game, the first league home game, which was on a Friday night. So I go to the game. I watch her. It's a close game all the way through. They're never down more than 5 points, but they're behind the whole game. She takes timeouts in the second half. She does what I tell her to do. She's demanding those timeouts. She's passionate. She said, girls, I want you to give me your best. Lay it all out on the floor. You got this. I believe in you. Damn it, you can do this. Let's go get this. Let's have a defense. Let's get the ball back. Very demanding. They lost the game by 1 point. Okay. She goes to the locker room. One of her assistants is a male, so we wait, and then I go to the locker room. She gives her speech. She does her press conference. It's Friday. I was going to leave the next morning. She says, hey, Izzy, I know you're not leaving till tomorrow. Let's go up to my office. We lost. Maybe you can tell me something. I said, well, no, let's just wait. And she said, no, come on up. So we go up to her office, and she said, give it to me. Bottom line this for me. And I said, you're the biggest hypocrite in the world. So let me pause and give you a context. In the 2 months that I've been working with her, using that instrument, I uncovered that for her, it was essentially one. But it was a big one. She is gay. She has been living with her partner for 18-some years, who is the head coach of another sport at the same school. She has not told her parents that she's gay. She's from the South. That's where she was raised. And her dad, she has a younger sister. She was a tomboy. Her dad taught her basketball. He follows her on Twitter. He follows the games. He watches them on TV. Like, her dad is everything, and he had all these slurs about, homophobic kinds of stuff, and she hadn't told him. So I knew we were going to work on that. So let me unpause. What do you mean I'm a hypocrite? I said, Coach, you looked at all those girls and you said, give me your best. Leave it all out there. You demanded it. And I said, you're not doing the same with your life. Why don't you go leave it out over there? This is a game. Yours is real life. She pointed a finger at me and she said, F you, you're fired. No lie. I get up, I leave. I wait that night at the hotel, she doesn't call. I wait the next morning, she doesn't call. Sunday night, I get a call. She said, Izzy, I'm at the Nashville airport. She's crying like crazy. She said, I just told my mom and my dad, and I had my younger sister who lives in Nashville also come with me. And I said, how'd it go? She said, not good. They were mad that she didn't tell them. They were mad at the younger sister for not telling them, and the younger sister has always known. They were mad that every time their parents went to go to the game and visit her home, that they called her partner a roommate. It did not go well. I said, how you feel? She said, I feel like I lost 100 pounds. And she said, Izzy, I have two things to say to you. One, I'm sorry. You're not fired. And she said, Izzy, what do I do now? And I said, what I just did with you, you go do for all those girls on your team. They had a game on Monday the next night. No practice. She told them exactly what I said to her. She told them her story. She came out publicly. And she said, girls, I've had this demon in me for 50-some years of my life. Tell me yours. I don't care about the game tonight. Screw practice. When she goes to recruit now, she goes to the parents of these young girls, and she said, I want you to trust me your daughter for 4 years, not because of basketball. Trust me with them because I am a life coach. I will take your children, your daughters, and I'll prepare them for all the negativity that will come in basketball, and I'll prepare them for life. 54 years old. And she said, Izzy, I was playing the wrong game. Basketball to her was important because it made her dad happy. This is a national championship coach. So my parting message to you is, don't think about winning or losing. It was never about winning or losing. Are you in the right game? If that game is not tied to your happiness and what's in your bank, you're playing the wrong game. It was never about more clients. It was never about more money. It was never about the shoes. It was never about the promotion. The world is huge because once this is gone, all of your mindfulness is released. You will see things, hear things in other people that will make you amazed at being a human being. That you're not looking just like you didn't look at someone's face and notice all those things or hear something. Last season, she went 31-2. She said, never screaming once, never demanding that they win. Thank you very much. I'm going to be outside for the next couple of hours.